They say that family loyalty should be sacred, but sometimes the people closest to us are the ones who betray us most deeply. My name is Richard, and this is the story of how my sister-in-law's campaign to steal my business ideas and destroy my career led me to orchestrate a revenge so calculated that it exposed her true nature and cost her everything she had worked to build. My wife Laura and I had been married for 6 years when her younger sister Melissa moved to our city to start her career in marketing. Melissa had just graduated from business school with an MBA and was looking for opportunities to establish herself in the competitive world of digital marketing and brand development. Laura was thrilled to have her sister living nearby, and she immediately began helping Melissa network and find job opportunities. Laura suggested that I might be able to provide Melissa with some guidance and mentorship, given my success in running my own consulting firm that specialized in helping small businesses develop their brand identity and marketing strategies. I was happy to help family, and I welcomed Melissa into our home for regular dinners and informal business discussions. Melissa seemed eager to learn and ask thoughtful questions about my work, my clients, and the strategies I use to help businesses grow and succeed in competitive markets. Melissa was intelligent, articulate, and ambitious, and I could see why she had done well in business school. She had a natural understanding of marketing principles and seemed to have good instincts about what would appeal to different types of customers and clients. Over the course of several months, I shared detailed information with Melissa about my business model, my client acquisition strategies, and the specific methodologies I had developed for helping businesses identify their target markets and develop effective marketing campaigns. I thought I was being generous with my knowledge and helping a family member get started in her career. Melissa would often take notes during our conversations, claiming that she wanted to remember the valuable insights I was sharing with her. She would ask follow-up questions about specific techniques and would request examples of successful campaigns I had developed for my clients. I was impressed by Melissa's attention to detail and her apparent dedication to learning the business. She seemed genuinely interested in understanding not just the theory behind effective marketing, but the practical aspects of running a successful consulting practice. What I didn't realize at the time was that Melissa was not just learning from me. She was systematically documenting my proprietary methods and strategies with the intention of using them to compete against me. She was essentially conducting industrial espionage under the guise of family mentorship. About 8 months after Melissa had moved to our city, she announced that she had decided to start her own marketing consulting firm rather than continue looking for employment with an established company. She claimed that our conversations had inspired her to become an entrepreneur and that she wanted to build something of her own rather than work for someone else. Laura and I were supportive of Melissa's entrepreneurial ambitions, and I offered to help her get started by providing references, introducing her to potential clients, and sharing additional insights about running a successful consulting practice. I thought it was wonderful that Melissa felt confident enough to start her own business, and I was proud that my mentorship had played a role in inspiring her decision. Melissa seemed grateful for my continued support and asked if I would be willing to review her business plan and marketing materials before she officially launched her company. She claimed that she valued my expertise and wanted to make sure she was positioning herself effectively in the market. When I reviewed Melissa's business plan and marketing materials, I was shocked to discover that she had essentially copied my entire business model, my service offerings, and even my marketing language. Her company description, her service packages, and her pricing structure were nearly identical to mine, with only minor variations in wording and presentation. Most disturbing of all, Melissa's marketing materials included detailed descriptions of proprietary methodologies that I had developed over years of working with clients. These were not general marketing principles that anyone could learn from textbooks. They were specific techniques and frameworks that I had created and refined through extensive experience and experimentation. Melissa had taken the knowledge I had shared with her in good faith and had used it to create a competing business that would directly target my potential clients and undermine my market position. She had essentially stolen my intellectual property and was planning to use it to compete against me in my own market. I confronted Melissa about the similarities between her business plan and my own company, but she claimed that any resemblance was coincidental and that she had developed her ideas independently. She suggested that since we worked in the same field, it was natural that our approaches would have some similarities. But the similarities were too extensive and too specific to be coincidental. Melissa had copied not just my general approach, but my specific terminology, my service descriptions, and even my pricing models. She had essentially created a clone of my business and was planning to launch it in direct competition with me. I realized that Melissa's request for mentorship had been a calculated strategy to gain access to my business secrets and competitive advantages. She had never been interested in learning from me as a family member. She had been conducting corporate espionage and planning to steal my business model from the very beginning. What made Melissa's betrayal even more devastating was the way she had manipulated Laura's trust and family loyalty to gain access to me and my business information. Laura had been so excited to help her sister that she had encouraged me to share detailed information about my work, never suspecting that Melissa would use that information against us. Melissa launched her competing business 3 months later, using marketing materials and service descriptions that were virtually identical to mine. She began targeting my existing clients and potential customers, offering similar services at slightly lower prices and claiming to have innovative methodologies that were actually my own proprietary techniques. The impact on my business was immediate and devastating. Several of my long-term clients began questioning whether they were paying too much for services that they could apparently get elsewhere for less money. Potential new clients started comparing my proposals to Melissa's offerings and asking why my prices were higher for what appeared to be similar services. Most frustrating of all, Melissa was able to offer lower prices because she hadn't invested the time and resources that I had spent developing the methodologies she was using. She was essentially selling my intellectual property at a discount because she had stolen it rather than creating it herself. I also discovered that Melissa had been more strategic in her theft than I had initially realized. She had not only copied my business model and methodologies, but she had also been gathering information about my clients and their specific needs during our family dinners and conversations. Melissa would ask seemingly innocent questions about my work, and I would share stories about interesting projects and challenging client situations. She had been using this information to identify my most valuable clients and to develop targeted approaches for stealing them away from me. Within 6 months of launching her business, Melissa had successfully poached 3 of my major clients and had positioned herself as a serious competitor in the local market. She was using my own strategies and techniques against me, and she was doing it with the advantage of lower overhead costs because she hadn't had to invest in developing the intellectual property she was using. I realized that Melissa's betrayal was not just about business competition. It was about a systematic campaign to destroy my livelihood and steal the success that I had worked years to build. She had used family relationships and trust to gain access to my most valuable business assets, and she was now using those assets to drive me out of the market. I decided that Melissa needed to face consequences for her theft and betrayal, but I also knew that I needed to be strategic in my approach. Simply accusing her of stealing my ideas would likely be dismissed as sour grapes from a competitor who was losing market share. Instead, I needed to gather evidence of Melissa's theft and expose her deception in a way that would be undeniable and would demonstrate the systematic nature of her betrayal. I wanted her to understand that her actions had consequences and that she could not build a successful business on stolen intellectual property. The plan I developed was designed to expose Melissa's theft while also protecting my own business interests and family relationships. I wanted to hold Melissa accountable for her actions without destroying Laura's relationship with her sister or creating permanent damage to our family dynamics. Phase 1 involved documenting the extent of Melissa's theft by comparing her business materials, methodologies, and client approaches to my own proprietary systems. I wanted to create a comprehensive record of exactly what she had stolen and how she was using my intellectual property to compete against me. I also began gathering evidence of the conversations and interactions where I had shared specific information with Melissa, including emails, notes, and witness accounts of our discussions. I wanted to establish a clear timeline showing how Melissa had gained access to my business secrets and how she had used that information to create her competing business. Phase 2 involved consulting with intellectual property attorneys to understand my legal options for protecting my business and holding Melissa accountable for her theft. I wanted to explore both civil remedies and potential criminal charges for corporate espionage and theft of trade secrets. Phase 3 involved exposing Melissa's theft to the business community and potential clients who might be considering working with her. I wanted them to understand that her services were based on stolen intellectual property and that she was not the innovative entrepreneur she claimed to be. Phase 4 was more personal and involved confronting Melissa with the evidence of her theft in a way that would force her to acknowledge what she had done and face the consequences of her betrayal of family trust. The final phase involved protecting my own business by developing new methodologies and approaches that would differentiate my services from Melissa's stolen offerings, while also taking legal action to prevent her from continuing to use my proprietary techniques. The confrontation happened on a Saturday afternoon in December, exactly 1 year after Melissa had first asked me to mentor her in the marketing business. Laura had invited Melissa over for dinner, and I had prepared a comprehensive presentation of the evidence I had gathered about her theft. Instead of engaging in our usual family conversation, I presented Melissa with a detailed comparison of her business materials and my own proprietary systems, showing point by point how she had copied my methodologies, terminology, and service offerings. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Melissa's reaction was initially one of shock and panic as she realized that her theft had been discovered and documented. She tried to deny the evidence at first, claiming that any similarities between our businesses were coincidental and that she had developed her ideas independently. But the evidence was too comprehensive and specific for her denials to be credible. I had documentation showing how she had gained access to my proprietary information, how she had used that information to create her business plan, and how she had systematically targeted my clients using strategies I had shared with her in confidence. When Melissa realized that denial wasn't working, she changed tactics and tried to minimize the significance of what she had done. She claimed that business ideas couldn't really be owned and that competition was natural in any industry. She suggested that I was overreacting to normal competitive practices. But I was not interested in Melissa's attempts to justify or rationalize her theft. The issue was not whether business competition was normal, but whether she had used family relationships and trust to steal proprietary information and intellectual property. She had betrayed not just business ethics, but family loyalty and personal trust. That afternoon, I also shared the evidence of Melissa's theft with Laura, showing her how her sister had manipulated our family relationships to gain access to my business secrets and had then used that information to compete against me. I wanted Laura to understand that Melissa's actions were not just business competition, but a systematic betrayal of family trust. Laura was devastated to learn about her sister's deception and theft. She had been so proud of Melissa's entrepreneurial success and had never suspected that it was built on stolen intellectual property. Laura felt betrayed and used, understanding that Melissa had exploited her love and support to gain access to my business information. The legal and business consequences for Melissa were swift and comprehensive. I filed lawsuits for theft of trade secrets, copyright infringement, and unfair business practices. The evidence I had gathered provided clear documentation of her systematic theft, making it impossible for her to contest the charges or claim that her actions were legitimate business practices. Melissa was also forced to face the professional consequences of her theft when I shared the evidence with industry organizations, potential clients, and business partners who had been considering working with her. Her reputation in the marketing community was destroyed as people realized that her services were based on stolen intellectual property. Most importantly, Melissa was forced to confront the reality that her theft had destroyed her relationship with Laura and had damaged our entire family. Laura could no longer trust her sister after discovering the extent of her deception and manipulation, and family gatherings became tense and uncomfortable. The most satisfying aspect of Melissa's exposure was watching her realize that her attempt to steal my business success had ultimately cost her everything she had worked to build. Her business was shut down due to legal action, her reputation was destroyed, and she had lost the trust and support of her family. Melissa had thought she was being clever by using family relationships to gain access to my business secrets, but she had failed to consider the long-term consequences of her betrayal. Her theft had not only been illegal and unethical, but it had also been ultimately self-destructive. The legal proceedings were decisive and comprehensive. Melissa was ordered to cease using my proprietary methodologies, to pay damages for the business she had stolen from me, and to publicly acknowledge that her business had been based on stolen intellectual property. She was also prohibited from working in the marketing consulting field for a specified period of time. Melissa's business was completely shut down, and she was forced to return to seeking employment with other companies rather than running her own consulting practice. The reputation damage from the legal proceedings made it difficult for her to find work in the marketing field, and she eventually had to change careers entirely. Most importantly, I was able to rebuild and strengthen my own business by developing new methodologies and approaches that were even more effective than the ones Melissa had stolen. The experience of having my intellectual property theft had motivated me to innovate and improve my services in ways that made my business more competitive and successful than ever. The clients that Melissa had stolen from me eventually returned when they realized that her services were based on stolen techniques and that she could not provide the ongoing innovation and development that they needed for long-term success. They understood that working with the original creator of the methodologies was more valuable than working with someone who had simply copied them. Looking back on this experience, I am proud of the way I handled Melissa's theft and betrayal. I could have responded with anger and family drama, but instead I took a strategic and legal approach that held her accountable while protecting my business interests and family relationships as much as possible. The experience taught me valuable lessons about the importance of protecting intellectual property and being cautious about sharing proprietary information, even with family members. I learned that trust must be earned and verified, and that family relationships do not automatically guarantee ethical behavior. Melissa's theft had been a betrayal not just of business ethics, but of family loyalty and personal trust. She had used Laura's love and support to gain access to my business secrets, and she had been willing to destroy my livelihood to advance her own career. The revenge I orchestrated against Melissa was comprehensive and devastating, but it was also necessary to protect my business and hold her accountable for her theft. Melissa had chosen to build her career on stolen intellectual property, and she had to face the full consequences of that decision. The family relationships that Melissa had exploited and damaged were slowly rebuilt over time, but they were never quite the same. Laura's trust in her sister was permanently damaged, and family gatherings remained somewhat strained even years after the legal proceedings had concluded. Most importantly, the experience strengthened my marriage with Laura as we worked together to deal with the betrayal and its aftermath. Laura was supportive and understanding throughout the legal proceedings, and she helped me rebuild my business and develop new approaches that were even more successful than before. The business that Melissa had tried to steal and destroy became stronger and more innovative as a result of the challenge she had presented. I was motivated to develop new methodologies and approaches that were more sophisticated and effective than the ones she had copied, and my business grew and prospered in ways that exceeded my original expectations. Melissa's story became a cautionary tale in the business community about the dangers of building a career on stolen intellectual property and the importance of developing original ideas and approaches. Her downfall served as a reminder that theft and deception ultimately destroy not just business relationships, but personal and family relationships as well. The intellectual property that Melissa had stolen was eventually returned to me through the legal proceedings, and I was able to continue developing and refining those methodologies in ways that benefited my clients and my business. Her theft had been a temporary setback, but it had ultimately led to greater innovation and success. In the end, Melissa's attempt to steal my business success had achieved the opposite of what she had intended. Instead of building a successful career, she had destroyed her reputation and her relationships. Instead of competing with me effectively, she had motivated me to become even more successful and innovative. The most important outcome of this entire experience was that I learned to value and protect the intellectual property and business relationships that I had worked so hard to build. I developed better systems for safeguarding proprietary information and for verifying the trustworthiness of people who sought access to my business secrets. The family trust that Melissa had betrayed was eventually rebuilt to some extent, but it was based on a more realistic understanding of human nature and the importance of maintaining appropriate boundaries between family relationships and business interests. Melissa eventually moved away from our city and started over in a different field, but the reputation damage from her theft followed her and continued to affect her career prospects for years. She learned that the consequences of betraying trust and stealing intellectual property extend far beyond immediate legal penalties. The revenge was complete, justice was served, and my business was stronger and more successful than ever. I had won not just a legal victory, but a moral victory that validated the importance of honesty, integrity, and respect for intellectual property in business relationships. Looking forward, I carried with me the lessons I had learned about the importance of protecting proprietary information verifying trust even with family members, and responding to betrayal with strategic thinking rather than emotional reactions. The experience had been painful and challenging, but it had also been educational and ultimately beneficial for my business and my understanding of human nature. I had learned that I was capable of handling systematic betrayal with dignity and strategic thinking, and I had proven that theft and deception ultimately fail when confronted with evidence and legal accountability. Melissa's betrayal had been a test of my character and my business acumen, and I had passed that test by responding with integrity, strategic thinking, and appropriate legal action. Her attempt to destroy my business had ultimately made it stronger, and her betrayal of family trust had ultimately strengthened my marriage and my understanding of the importance of loyalty and honesty in all relationships. The intellectual property that she had tried to steal became the foundation for even greater innovation and success, and the business relationships that she had tried to damage became stronger and more valuable as a result of the challenges we had overcome together. In the end, the revenge was not just about holding Melissa accountable for her theft, but about proving that honesty and integrity will ultimately prevail over deception and betrayal. Her downfall served as a reminder that building success on stolen foundations is ultimately unsustainable and self-destructive. The family relationships that had been damaged by her betrayal were slowly healed through time and understanding, but they were also strengthened by a clearer understanding of the importance of trust, honesty, and appropriate boundaries between personal and professional relationships. Melissa's story became a permanent reminder in our family and our business community that trust is precious and fragile, and that betraying that trust for short-term gain ultimately leads to long-term consequences that far exceed any temporary benefits. The revenge was complete, the lessons were learned, and my business and family relationships were stronger and more resilient than ever before. I had won not just a battle against a dishonest competitor, but a victory for the principles of integrity and accountability that should guide all business and family relationships.